Hello dear members of the Soul Stories family. Today we will bring you a romantic love story, so let's get started. Chapter 1. Emma's Life, Ordinary but Not Mediocre. It was late at night, and the faint blue light from the computer screen shone on Emma's face, highlighting her tired eyes that still sparkled with an indescribable determination. She sat on an old swivel chair, her back slightly hunched, her right hand controlling the mouse with gentle clicks, while her left hand propped up her chin, keeping her head from dropping onto the desk. Her small apartment was nestled in a modest neighborhood, where the distant sounds of car horns and barking dogs echoed through the slightly open window. Outside, the city remained vibrant, but in this room, time seemed to slow down, leaving only the clacking of the keyboard and Emma's soft sighs. Emma was only 27 years old, but sometimes she felt much older than that. It wasn't because of wrinkles, she didn't have any yet, but because of the invisible scars life had left on her soul. As a freelance graphic designer, she had talent, a fact no one could deny. Her designs always carried a distinct signature: bold colors, creative layouts, and a touch of defiance, as if she were challenging the world through every line. But that talent had yet to be widely recognized. She was still just a freelancer, chasing deadlines for small clients, earning enough to pay rent and stock a few packs of instant noodles in the kitchen cabinet. The big opportunity, the one she had always dreamed of, continued to elude her like a cruel joke of fate. Emma's apartment was so small that a single turn could let her touch everything. A single bed pressed against the wall, a desk cluttered with drawing paper and cold coffee cups, a small bookshelf holding a few design books and worn-out novels. On the wall, she had pinned some of her favorite sketches, pieces she had once hoped to submit to big companies, but hesitated to send, fearing rejection. Not good enough, she told herself, though deep down she knew she was just making excuses to delay. Emma wasn't the type to give up easily. She was strong, independent, and loved freedom to the point of near stubbornness. She had once told her friends she'd rather starve than live relying on someone else. This wasn't just empty talk. It was the guiding principle of her life, forged through years of hardship. Her mother had died when she was just 13, from cancer the family couldn't afford to treat. Her father, a weak and alcoholic man, abandoned her right after the funeral, leaving Emma with an empty house and a small debt she had to pay off gradually through odd jobs, washing dishes, delivering newspapers, or even collecting recyclables. From then on, she learned that in this world, no one was more reliable than herself. The sudden ring of the phone interrupted Emma's thoughts. She glanced at the screen. It was Mia, her best friend from high school. Emma grimaced, certain Mia was about to drag her somewhere. She picked up, her voice slightly irritated. "Hello, what is it?" "It's late, and you're still calling." Mia's crisp laughter rang out from the other end. "Emma, stop pretending you're busy. Come out with me. There's a new bar opening on West Street. The music's great. And there are some hot guys, too." Emma sighed, rubbing her temples. "No, I'm working. Plus, I don't have money, you know that." "Come on, I'll cover it. Think of it as a late birthday treat," Mia pleaded, her voice brimming with excitement. Emma shook her head, though she knew Mia couldn't see. "No, I don't like owing anyone, even you. Besides, I have to finish this design by morning. The client's rushing me." Mia grumbled something about Emma, living like an old lady, then hung up after a string of failed persuasion attempts. Emma set the phone down, looked at the pile of papers in front of her, and gave a faint smile. It was true, she didn't like owing anyone. Even in friendship, she wanted it to be fair, not taking anything she couldn't repay. Perhaps that's why she had so few friends, but those who stayed, like Mia, understood her nature and accepted it. She returned to the design on her screen, a poster for a local perfume brand. The client wanted luxurious yet approachable, a vague request that had her struggling for 3 days. She dragged the color slider on the software, testing a champagne gold tone, then erased it because it felt too ostentatious. "I hate fake stuff," she muttered, her hand still moving the mouse. But she knew this was work, and she couldn't let personal feelings ruin it. The clock on the wall struck 1 a.m. Emma yawned widely, stretching until she heard her joints crack. She stood up, walked to the tiny kitchen corner, grabbed a pack of noodles from the cabinet, and poured boiling water in. The smell of instant noodles mingled with the damp air from the rain outside, stirring a sudden memory of her childhood, when her mother used to cook her a hot bowl of noodles after late study nights. It was one of the rare memories left of a once happy family before everything fell apart. Emma sat on the floor, holding the bowl of noodles, her eyes gazing distantly out the window. The streetlights flickered, reflecting off rain puddles. She wondered if her life would always be like this, an endless cycle of sleepless nights, bills to pay, and dreams put on hold. She didn't want to just survive. She wanted to shine, to see her name on big billboards and international ad campaigns. But the path there seemed so far away, and sometimes she questioned if she had the strength to keep going. She set the empty noodle bowl down, wiped her hands on her old t-shirt, and returned to her desk. Just finish this, and I'll rest a bit, she told herself, though she knew rest a bit was often a lie to comfort herself. Emma turned on some gentle lo-fi music, put on her headphones, and kept drawing. The lines on the screen gradually took shape, a testament that no matter how tough life got, she wouldn't give up. Little did she know, just a few hours from now, a fateful accident would change everything, pulling her into a game she was utterly unprepared to face. Welcome to Soul Stories. Life can be overwhelming, but here we share heartfelt tales to bring you peace, joy, and inspiration. Your support, every comment, like, and follow, means the world to us. It motivates us to create more meaningful and uplifting stories just for you. Did our latest story touch your heart? Leave a "I am happy" in the comments if you agree. Subscribe now and be part of a community that spreads love, kindness, and positivity. Let's make every day a little brighter together. Chapter 2. The Fateful Accident. Meeting William. Rain fell heavily, each drop pounding hard against the windshield, blurring Emma's view. She leaned forward, squinting to see through the thick curtain of rain, her hands gripping the steering wheel of the old Honda she had borrowed from Mia. The engine rattled with each beat, as if straining against this mini-storm. Emma didn't like driving in weather like this, but Mia had begged her to deliver some items to the bar for a belated birthday party setup. "Just this once, I swear," Mia had said with those puppy eyes Emma couldn't refuse. And now here she was, on a slippery road, the radio crackling with distorted pop music mixed with the sound of rain. She muttered a curse under her breath as the car skidded slightly on a puddle. "I should have stayed home," she told herself, tightening her grip on the wheel. The traffic light ahead turned red, but in a fleeting moment of distraction, she didn't brake in time. A loud bam rang out, followed by a jolt that slammed her chest into the steering wheel. Panic surged through her, her heart pounding, her hands trembling as she realized she'd crashed into something definitely not cheap. Emma flung the car door open and stepped out, heedless of the rain soaking her hoodie. Before her stood a sleek black Porsche 911 Turbo S, its rear crumpled in a large dent, long scratches marring the expensive metallic paint. The headlights of her Honda illuminated the damage, highlighting it like an accusation. "I'm done for," she whispered, feeling the blood drain from her body. The Porsche's door slowly opened, and a tall figure stepped out. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, not a wrinkle in sight despite the downpour. He didn't bother with an umbrella, letting the raindrops roll down his neatly styled black hair. Emma couldn't see his face clearly at first, the streetlights obscured by the rain, but she felt a chill radiating from him, as if he'd brought winter itself with him. Are you okay?" Emma stammered, her voice shaky from cold and fear. She stepped closer, arms hugging her shoulders to keep warm. Under the dim, hazy light, she vaguely realized she stood out despite being drenched. Her long brown hair clung wetly to her delicate oval face. Her large eyes glowed with panic, and her fair skin shone strikingly in the rain. She wasn't a glamorous beauty, but she had a natural, captivating charm that made it hard to look away. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. It was raining so hard, I couldn't see." He turned around and Emma got her first clear look at the man's face. Gray eyes sharp as knives, a high nose, thin lips, and a jawline chiseled like stone. He was handsome, but in an arrogant, dangerous way, like a predator. William, as she would soon learn his name, didn't respond immediately. He walked to the rear of the car, bent down to inspect the damage, hands in his pockets as if it were a trivial matter. Emma stood there flustered. "I'll pay for it, I swear. I, I'll call insurance." She stopped, remembering Mia's car didn't have full coverage. "Oh no," she whispered, hand covering her mouth as the gravity of her situation sank in. William finally spoke, his voice deep and even, like an emotionless melody. $50,000, he said, not looking up. "That's the repair cost, not counting other inconveniences." Emma's mind reeled. 50,000, she repeated, her voice breaking. "Are you kidding me? I don't even have $500 in my account, let alone 50,000. She let out a panicked laugh, looking at him with the hope he'd say it was a joke, but those gray eyes held no trace of humor. William straightened up, brushed his hands off, and turned to face her. He didn't get angry or shout. He just observed her from head to toe with an inscrutable gaze. Emma felt like she was being examined, but this time she noticed his eyes lingered longer on her face, as if he were assessing something beyond the accident. She instinctively crossed her arms over her chest, trying to hide her unease under that cold stare. "I'm not kidding," he said, his tone calm yet chilling. "You hit my car, and I need compensation. Simple logic." Emma swallowed hard, rainwater dripping from her soaked hair into her wide, fearful eyes. I don't have the money. I'm just a freelancer. I do graphic design. I can't pay that much right now. But I'll try, I promise. I can pay in installments." "Installments?" William cut her off, the corner of his mouth lifting into a faint, sinister smirk. He stepped closer, so near she could smell the expensive cologne mingling with the scent of rain on him. "I don't have time for that nonsense, but first—" He paused, eyeing her with a probing look. "Are you married?" Emma froze, baffled by the question. No, she answered, her voice hesitant. "Why do you ask?" William nodded slightly as if confirming something. "Good," he said, then tilted his head, his gaze locking onto hers like a panther targeting prey. "I have another proposal. Marry me for a year. Do that, and I'll wipe out this debt. You won't have to pay a cent." Silence enveloped them, broken only by the steady patter of rain and the thumping of Emma's heart. She stared at him, mouth agape but speechless. Finally, she burst into a wild laugh. "You're crazy," she said, shaking her head. "What's wrong with you to think I'd agree to something that twisted?" William didn't join her laughter. He stood there, his gray eyes unwavering. "I'm not joking," he repeated, and Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. She realized he was serious, completely serious. This man with the Porsche, the costly suit, and an arrogance that suggested the world lay at his feet was proposing marriage to erase her debt. This wasn't a movie. It was reality, and it was happening to her. Emma stepped back, her trembling hands clutching her head. "I need time to think," she said, her voice weak. I can't decide right now." William nodded, pulled a glossy black business card from his pocket, and handed it to her. "You have 48 hours, he said, then turned back to his car. The Porsche roared to life, its engine drowning out the rain, and he vanished into the night, leaving Emma standing there, drenched and bewildered, the card in her hand like a ticking time bomb. Chapter 3. The Marriage Contract, Emma's Reluctance. Emma stood in front of the mirror in her tiny bathroom, her hands gripping the edge of the sink, her red-rimmed eyes staring intently at her reflection. Rainwater from last night's accident still lingered in her long brown hair, matting it into tangled strands. Her delicate oval face was now pale, her usually bright, large eyes cloaked in a layer of exhaustion and confusion. She had just returned home after William left her in the rain, his glossy black business card lying alone on the kitchen table like an inescapable reminder. "Marry me for a year," she muttered, her voice hoarse, then let out a bitter laugh. "Absolutely insane." She turned back to the living room, her bare feet stepping onto the cold wooden floor. The soaked hoodie had been replaced with an old t-shirt, but she still felt chilled, not from the weather, but from the twisted idea that man had proposed. $50,000. That amount loomed over her like a mountain, and she had no way to climb it. Emma plopped down onto a chair, cradling her head in her hands, desperately searching for a way out. I could borrow from a bank, she told herself, only to dismiss it immediately. With a freelancer's erratic income and no collateral, no bank would lend her such a large sum. Mia? She thought of her best friend, but Mia was just a bartender, hardly flush enough to help. Emma stood up and walked to the kitchen table, where a messy pile of bills sat next to William's business card. She picked them up, her hands trembling as she read each figure. Overdue rent, electricity bills, internet costs, all totaling less than $1,000, but to her, they were already a burden. And now an additional $50,000 because of one stupid moment on the road. She threw the papers back onto the table, shouting, "I can't do this!" But then she fell silent, realizing no one was there to hear her. She picked up the business card, her fingers tracing the embossed text. William Carter, CEO, Carter Enterprises. No phone number, just an office address in the city center. A place where even passing by made her feel out of place among the skyscrapers and wealthy people. Marry him for a year, she muttered again, and this time, the idea didn't seem funny anymore. It was terrifying, but it was also the only escape she could think of. She hated admitting it, but reason was slowly overpowering her emotions. No, she said aloud, tossing the card down as if it burned her. I can't sell my life to a lunatic like that. But that night, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling as her mind spun with numbers and images of William, his cold gray eyes, his sinister smirk, his deep voice issuing commands. By 4 a.m., as dawn peeked through the window, she sat up, clutching her phone tightly. Just to ask more, she told herself, though she knew she was weaving an excuse to step into that trap. 48 hours later, Emma stood before the towering Carter Enterprises building, her feet frozen on the sidewalk. She wore a simple white blouse and jeans, trying to look more presentable than usual, but still felt out of place among the people around her. Men in expensive suits, women with designer handbags. The building loomed high, its glass facade reflecting the glaring sunlight, a symbol of power she could never belong to. She took a deep breath, stepped inside, gripping the business card like a talisman. The reception area was luxurious, with a blonde employee offering a professional smile. I'm here to see William Carter, Emma said, her voice slightly shaky. The woman eyed her up and down, a flicker of doubt in her gaze, but she made a call to the office. After a few minutes, she nodded. Floor 35. He's expecting you. The elevator carried Emma upward, each ding like a hammer striking her heart. When the doors opened, she stepped into a vast hallway, the marble floor gleaming, the walls adorned with pricey abstract paintings. A secretary led her to William's office, and as the door swung open, she saw him sitting behind a large desk, his gray eyes lifting from a stack of papers. He wore a different gray suit, still impeccable as before, but this time there was no rain to mask the arrogance radiating from him. You came, William said, his tone even unsurprised. He set his pen down, leaned back in his chair, and scanned her as he had at their first meeting. I thought you wouldn't show. Emma stood there, hands shoved into her pockets to hide their trembling. She took a breath, then exploded. Why me? Her voice was louder than she intended, laced with anger and confusion. You have money, power, a ton of people ready to grovel at your feet. Why pick someone like me, a nobody who crashed into your car, with no money, no status, for this marriage stunt? William didn't answer immediately. He stood, stepped out from behind the desk, and approached her with slow, confident strides. When he stopped just a few feet away, the corner of his mouth lifted into a faint smile. Not joyful, but as if amused by her question. Because you're not like those who cling to me, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. They grovel at my feet for money, opportunities, attention. But you, he tilted his head, his gaze locking onto her large eyes. You stand here angry, defying me, even though you have nothing in your hands. That's interesting. Emma was stunned, unsure how to respond. She wanted to scream that he was sick, but the words stuck in her throat. William turned back to the desk, pulled a stack of papers from a drawer, and placed it in front of her. Here's the contract, he said, his tone reverting to cold detachment. 1 year living together, playing husband and wife in public. No interference in each other's private lives. After a year, you're free, and the $50,000 debt ceases to exist. Emma stared at the papers, her heart pounding. She flipped through the pages, reading the dry terms. Appearing with him at events, keeping the agreement secret, not leaving the city without his consent. Each word felt like an invisible chain wrapping around her neck. "This is my life," she whispered, her voice choked. "You're buying it." "No," William interrupted, his gaze sharp and cold. "I'm giving you a way out. Choose. Sign it or find a way to pay $50,000 on your own." Emma looked at him, then at the contract. She wanted to tear it apart, to run out of there and forget everything. But then the image of the pile of bills, her small apartment, and her unfulfilled dreams flashed in her mind. Her trembling hand picked up the pen, tears welling up but held back by a bite of her lip. "I won't forgive you," she said, her voice so low it was almost a whisper, then pressed the pen to the paper. Her signature appeared, scrawled and reluctant, like a declaration of surrender. William nodded, collecting the contract. "Good," he said, devoid of emotion. "Tomorrow you move into my place. The game starts now." Emma turned and walked out, not looking back. But inside her, a smoldering fire had just been kindled, not to submit, but to find a way to reclaim her freedom. Chapter 4. The Extravagant Wedding. Sophia Appears. Emma stood before a full-length mirror in a spacious room, her large eyes reflecting the light from the lavish crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling. She wore a pristine white wedding gown that reached the floor, crafted from soft Italian silk and adorned with hundreds of sparkling Swarovski crystals. The dress hugged her body, accentuating the graceful curves she usually hid beneath oversized t-shirts. A team of stylists buzzed around her like diligent bees. One adjusted the train of the gown, another carefully pinned a delicate tiara onto her long brown hair, styled in gentle waves. They murmured something about her looking perfect, but Emma only felt like a doll, beautiful, expensive, and soulless. "Don't move, Mrs. Carter," one stylist said, holding a pin to adjust the gown's waist. Emma grimaced at the name. She wasn't Mrs. Carter, at least not in any real sense. Everything had happened so fast, less than a week since signing the contract, and William had turned her into the centerpiece of a plan she didn't fully understand. She had been brought to his mansion the very next morning, a place so vast she got lost in its hallways. Her own home, or rather his. Her luggage consisted only of an old backpack, but William had ordered all her old clothes thrown out, replacing them with a wardrobe full of designer labels she couldn't even pronounce. "This isn't me," Emma muttered, staring at her reflection. She raised a hand to touch the tiara, but a stylist quickly stopped her. "Don't mess up your hair. You have to be the most beautiful today." Emma gave a faint smile, thinking to herself that she didn't want to be beautiful. She just wanted to be herself, sitting in her small apartment with her laptop and a pack of instant noodles, not standing here, preparing to step into a sham wedding. The door swung open and William walked in. He wore a jet black tuxedo, tailored to fit his tall, imposing frame and exuding his usual cold demeanor. His gray eyes swept over her, devoid of emotion, though the corner of his mouth twitched upward slightly, as if pleased with his creation. "You look decent," he said, his tone flat, like he was appraising a decorative object. "Don't ruin it out there." Emma turned to him, her eyes flashing with anger. "I'm not your puppet," she said, her voice low but sharp. "You might have bought me with a contract, but don't think you own me." William tilted his head, a hint of amusement flickering in his gaze. "You're mistaken," he replied, stepping closer until she could smell the sandalwood cologne on him. "I don't own you. I'm just borrowing you for a year. Play your role well, and we'll both benefit." He turned away, gesturing for her to follow. "Come on, the guests are waiting." The wedding took place in an opulent ballroom at the city's most expensive five-star hotel. The marble floor gleamed under the glow of chandeliers, rows of tables draped in white silk, adorned with imported roses and fine wine glasses. The elite gathered in droves, their laughter mingling with music from a live orchestra. Reporters swarmed, camera flashes firing relentlessly as Emma and William entered. He held her hand, not too tightly, but firmly enough that she couldn't pull away. Emma forced an awkward smile, feeling like an actor in a play whose lines she didn't know. Marrying so quickly, there's got to be something behind it, a voice whispered from the crowd. William Carter wedding an unknown girl? Probably just to polish his image, another replied. Emma heard it all but kept her face impassive, trying not to show her irritation. William, in contrast, seemed utterly at ease, as if he were born to stand in the spotlight. Then a figure emerged from the crowd, drawing every eye. A tall, slender woman in a striking red evening gown approached with a radiant but blatantly fake smile. Her golden hair fell in perfect curls, her sharp blue eyes slicing through Emma like a blade. Sophia. Emma didn't need an introduction to guess who she was. William's ex, mentioned once in a cryptic, fleeting remark. She was beautiful, in a way Emma could never match, sharp, regal, and commanding. William, Sophia said, her voice sweet but edged with thorns. She stepped forward, a champagne flute in hand, her gaze sliding over Emma as if she didn't exist. I'm surprised you married so fast. I didn't think you'd need someone to fill that void so soon. She emphasized void, her smile growing more sardonic. Emma felt the blood rush to her face, but before she could retort, William acted. He pulled her close, one arm encircling her waist, the other gently but deliberately lifting her chin. In front of hundreds of guests and Sophia, he leaned down and pressed a light kiss to her forehead. The crowd gasped, cameras flashed wildly, but Emma's heart stopped for a second. The kiss wasn't warm, it was cold, performative, more a statement than a feeling. William straightened, locking eyes with Sophia, his smile icy. Not everyone is easily replaced, he said, his deep voice resonating, but my wife is one of a kind. He stressed wife, his gaze fixed on Sophia like a challenge. Sophia stiffened, her smile faltering for a moment before twisting into a scornful smirk. Congratulations, she said, her tone saccharine to the point of nausea. I hope you can keep her longer this time. Then she turned, blending back into the crowd, leaving a ripple of curious murmurs among the guests. Emma stood there, her hand still trapped in his grip, her face burning with embarrassment and anger. She turned to him, whispering through gritted teeth, "What the hell was that?" "I'm not a prop for your revenge game." But William only glanced at her, his eyes cold. "You signed the contract," he replied, his voice unwavering. "Cooperate, unless you want things to get worse." Emma swallowed her rage, forcing a smile as the camera flashes flared again. She hated him, hated this wedding, hated Sophia and the game she'd been dragged into. But she had no choice. Not yet. As William led her to the dance floor for their first waltz, she vowed to herself that one day she'd break free from this invisible leash, no matter the cost. Chapter 5. A Stifling Life. Emma's Confinement. The morning sunlight filtered through the thin white silk curtains, casting a glow on the polished marble floor of the expansive bedroom Emma now called home. She sat on the edge of the king-size bed, her bare feet dangling, her hands gripping a phone that had been powered off since last night. Beside her, on an armchair, lay an emerald green evening gown, paired with sparkling high heels, and a brief handwritten note in William's firm script. "Wear this tonight." Event at 7, Emma stared at the outfit, her lips pressed into a tight line. This wasn't the first time he'd chosen her clothes, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. Everything had started changing right after the wedding. In the early days, Emma thought she could endure it, just play the role of Mrs. Carter in public, smile for the photos, and stay silent when reporters asked questions. But William didn't stop there. He began interfering in every tiny detail of her life, as if she were no longer a person, but merely a piece of his perfect plan. Her wardrobe was now filled with expensive dresses, silk blouses, and high heels. Not a single pair of jeans or a t-shirt remained. "You're my wife," he had said one morning when she tried to wear the old hoodie she'd secretly kept in her backpack. "You need to dress in a way that matches my reputation." Emma had argued that she didn't need his reputation, but William just looked at her with those cold gray eyes and replied, "You don't have a choice." The control didn't end with clothing. A week after the wedding, William summoned her to his study in the mansion, a grand room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a glossy mahogany desk, and windows overlooking a meticulously tended garden. He sat behind the desk, his fingers tapping lightly on the wood, his gaze sharp as a blade. "You need to quit your freelance work," he said, his tone even but carrying the weight of a command. Emma froze, thinking she'd misheard. "What?" she asked, her voice rising in anger. "You heard me," William replied, not bothering to look up from his papers. "Your petty design jobs aren't suitable for a wife in your position now. They affect my image." Emma felt the blood rush to her head, her hands clenching into fists. "That job is my life," she said, her voice trembling with restraint. "I was doing it before I met you, and I won't give it up just because you want me to be a display doll." William finally looked up, his eyes locking onto hers, cold and unyielding. "You signed the contract, don't forget," he said, each word hammering into her pride. "1 year, Emma, just 1 year, and you'll be free. But for that time, you belong to me, at least in the eyes of the world." She turned and stormed out of the room, not wanting him to see the tears welling in her eyes. From that day on, William severed her ties to the outside world. He forbade her from seeing friends. "They're not of our class," he said when she suggested inviting Mia over for dinner. Her phone was monitored, messages screened before reaching her, and her laptop, the thing she cherished most, was confiscated with the excuse that she didn't need it anymore. Emma felt like a prisoner in this lavish mansion, where everything was beautiful but frigid, where she had everything, yet nothing was truly hers. She hated this feeling, the suffocation, the loss of freedom, and above all, the helplessness. Each passing day made her feel more like a decorative object than a human being. William never yelled or showed anger. He controlled her with a terrifying calm, with short commands and looks that made her shiver. But Emma wasn't one to break easily. She had survived the toughest years of her life on her own, and she wouldn't let him crush her spirit. One afternoon, while William was out for a meeting, Emma decided to rebel. She secretly rummaged through the old backpack she'd hidden in a corner of the closet, the last remnant of her former life. Inside, she found a pair of ripped jeans and a worn black baseball cap. Items she'd once loved for the comfort and freedom they brought her. She slipped them on, the rough fabric hugging her legs like a reminder that she was still herself, if only for this moment. She pulled the cap low over her face, then grabbed a thin jacket from the maid's closet to disguise herself. Her plan was simple: sneak out to meet Mia just once, to breathe the air of freedom and remind herself she didn't fully belong here. She knew the mansion had guards and cameras, but she'd observed long enough to spot a flaw: the side gate in the back garden, often left unlocked by the gardener during cleanup. Emma slipped out, her heart pounding in her chest, but each step felt like liberation. She took a taxi to a small cafe in the suburbs, the spot Mia had agreed to meet after Emma sent a secret message through a maid's phone. When Emma walked into the cafe, Mia barely recognized her. "Oh my God, Emma!" Mia shrieked, leaping from her chair to hug her tightly. "You look like you just broke out of jail." Emma laughed, the first time in days she felt a weight lift. They sat down, chatting as if no time had passed. Mia talked about her job at the bar, a new guy flirting with her, while Emma just listened, trying to forget the stifling life she was trapped in. "Are you okay?" Mia asked suddenly, her eyes worried. Emma nodded, but her smile couldn't hide her exhaustion. "I'm fine," she lied. "Just a bit busy." But that fleeting taste of freedom didn't last. As Emma stepped out of the cafe, a familiar black car pulled up in front of her. The door opened and a tall man in a black suit, William's bodyguard, stepped out. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice stiff. "Please get in the car. Mr. Carter's waiting for you." Emma stiffened, feeling like she'd been caught in an invisible net. She glanced at Mia, who stood frozen beside her, then reluctantly climbed into the car, her hand clutching the brim of her cap. When she arrived back at the mansion, William was waiting in the living room, a glass of red wine in hand, his eyes icy. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice low but sharp as a blade. Emma yanked off her cap, tossing it to the floor, her eyes blazing with defiance. "I went to see a friend," she said, unflinching. "I'm not your prisoner." William set the glass down and stepped toward her, towering over her by a full head. "Did you think you could sneak out without me knowing?" he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "My guards saw you the moment you stepped through the garden gate. This is the last time, Emma. Next time, the consequences won't be as simple as a talk. He turned away, leaving her standing there, feeling as though the air in the room had been sucked dry. Emma watched his retreating back, her hands trembling with anger and helplessness. She realized that no matter how she resisted, she was still confined in this gilded cage, and William held the key. Chapter 6. Sophia's Secret Revealed. William's Painful Past. The afternoon in William's mansion was unusually quiet. Emma sat on a velvet-upholstered armchair in the expansive living room, holding a design book she had secretly borrowed from his bookshelf, a small effort to cling to some remnant of herself amid this stifling life. Pale golden sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating the polished marble floor and the costly paintings on the walls. But the air in the room remained as cold as ever. William had been out since morning, leaving her with the silent maids and guards stationed at every corner. Emma no longer tried to escape after being caught at the cafe. She knew she couldn't slip past his watchful eyes. The doorbell suddenly rang, shattering the stillness. Emma looked up, frowning as she heard the sharp clack of high heels on the floor from the entrance. A maid hurried to open the door, and then a woman's sweet but icy voice echoed through, "I'm here to see William." "Where is he?" Emma stiffened, recognizing that voice instantly. Sophia. Before she could react, Sophia strode into the living room, her red high heels clicking confidently on the floor. She wore a form-fitting black dress that accentuated her tall, slender frame, her golden hair cascading loosely like silk. Her sharp blue eyes swept over Emma, accompanied by a mocking smirk. "Oh, the new wife," Sophia said, her tone sweet but laced with barbs. She sat down on the chair across from Emma without being invited, crossing her legs and placing a small clutch on her lap. "William's not home? I thought he always kept you within sight." Emma set the book down, trying to keep her voice calm despite the blood rushing to her face. "He's out," she replied curtly. "If you want to see him, wait. I'm not his scheduler." Sophia chuckled, a sound like silver bells but dripping with contempt. "You don't need to be so tense," she said, tilting her head to scrutinize Emma from head to toe. "I just stopped by to visit him. After all, we had some very happy times together." She emphasized happy, her eyes flashing with provocation. "You know, back then, William was so sweet. He once took me to Paris just for dinner, and we sat by the Seine until late. He wasn't cold like he is now." Emma clenched her hands under the table, feeling as though Sophia was deliberately stabbing at her pride. "I don't care," she said, her voice firm. "That's his past, not mine." But inside, curiosity began to stir. William, cold and controlling, she knew that well. But sweet? She couldn't imagine it. Sophia shrugged, pulling a small bottle of wine and 2 glasses from her bag. "Come on, don't be so uptight," she said, pouring wine into both glasses without asking Emma's permission. "Drink with me. Think of it as getting to know William's new family." She slid a glass toward Emma, her smile growing more sinister. Emma eyed the wine, hesitant. She didn't want anything to do with Sophia, but the arrogance in her gaze made it impossible to refuse. She picked up the glass, taking a small sip, the rich red wine sliding down her throat, leaving a warm sensation. Sophia downed her glass in one gulp, then poured another, her eyes starting to glaze over with drunkenness. "You know," she slurred, her voice growing sloppy. "William loved me like crazy. If he hadn't left me after the baby thing, he'd be a father by now." Emma froze, her glass halting midair. "The baby?" she repeated, her voice trembling with shock. Sophia sneered, unaware she'd let something slip. "Yeah, the baby," she said, waving her hand as if telling a funny story. "I was pregnant, but I didn't keep it. My family wouldn't accept it. My career wouldn't allow it. William didn't know until it was too late." She paused, staring into her empty glass, a flicker of pain crossing her eyes before being masked by arrogance. Emma set her glass on the table, feeling as if the air had been sucked out of the room. She stood, intending to leave, but her feet felt rooted to the spot. That secret, the baby, Sophia's betrayal, explained so much about William. His coldness, his control, the way he looked at her as if she might vanish at any moment. Before she could step away, the front door opened and William walked in, his demeanor weary but still sharply cold as usual. Sophia looked up, a drunken smile blooming on her lips. "William," she exclaimed, stumbling to her feet and staggering toward him. "You're back just in time. I was telling your little wife about us." William stiffened, his eyes darting from Sophia to Emma, as if assessing the situation. Emma couldn't hold back any longer. She stepped forward, facing him, her voice shaking with anger and curiosity. "What's this about a baby?" she demanded, heedless of Sophia's presence. "She said you had a child, but she got rid of it. Is that true?" William turned to Sophia, his gray eyes igniting with a rare fury. "You're drunk," he said to her, his voice low and almost a growl. "Get out." Sophia smirked, but seeing his expression, she fell silent, grabbed her bag and stumbled out, leaving the room steeped in heavy silence. "Answer me," Emma pressed, stepping closer to William. "Is that why you're like this? Why you control me? Control everything?" William faced her, his eyes darkening like a storm held in check. "Don't meddle in my affairs," he said, his voice cold, but, for the first time, she heard it tremble, not from fear, but from pain. He moved past her, intending to leave, but paused, his back to her. In that silent moment, memories flooded his mind like an old film reel. 3 years ago, William stood in Sophia's luxurious apartment, holding a small box with an engagement ring he'd spent weeks choosing. He had planned to propose that night, under the shimmering lights of a rooftop restaurant he'd reserved entirely. But when he walked in, Sophia sat on the sofa, her eyes red, her voice choked. "I'm sorry, William." I couldn't keep it. He didn't understand until she confessed she'd been 3 months pregnant, but her family forced her to abort because he wasn't good enough for their lineage, and her modeling career couldn't be interrupted. William had yelled, smashed a wine glass on the table, but the real pain came later, when he realized she hadn't told him. He found out too late, when it was all gone. From then on, his heart froze, turning him into the cold man Emma met today. William turned back, looking at Emma, his eyes no longer a storm, but a deep lake, full of hidden hurt. "You wouldn't understand," he said, his voice hoarse, "and I don't want you to." He walked out of the room, leaving Emma standing there stunned. She realized that William wasn't just controlling her to protect his reputation. He was running from his past, and she, unwittingly, had become part of the wall he'd built to forget Sophia and that pain. Chapter 7. The Last Straw. Emma decides to leave. Emma sat in the vast but frigid bedroom of the mansion, the soft light from a small desk lamp illuminating her face, highlighting her large eyes now red from exhaustion. Before her was her old laptop, the only thing she'd managed to convince William to return after countless arguments. It was no longer the sleek machine she'd bought years ago. Now it was covered in scratches, the enter key loose, and a faint border blurred the screen's left corner. But to Emma, it was her entire world, a place where she crafted her dreams, the last thread tying her to herself before being swept into this suffocating existence. She opened her email, her hands trembling as she spotted a new message from an old client. A small design project for a local cafe, worth just a few $100s. It wasn't the big break she'd once dreamed of, but it was a glimmer of hope, a reminder that she could still do what she loved, despite William's prohibitions. Just one project, she told herself, her fingers gliding over the keyboard to reply. She hid it carefully, working only when William was out and always erasing her history afterward. But today, she took a bigger risk. She opened her design software and began sketching a logo with bold lines and vibrant colors, a declaration that she was still alive, still Emma. The sound of the front door echoed from afar, followed by the strong, familiar footsteps she instantly recognized. William was back early. Emma panicked, frantically closing the software. But the laptop lagged, the logo still on display as William entered the room. He wore a gray suit, his tie slightly loosened, his cold gray eyes sweeping over her and landing on the computer. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice deep but sharp as a blade. Emma shot to her feet, slamming the laptop shut with a clumsy motion. "Nothing," she said, her voice quivering but striving for calm. "Just looking at some things." But William wasn't easily fooled. He stepped forward, each stride like a hammer striking the marble floor. Without a word, he snatched the laptop from her hands, flipped it open, and the screen's glow lit up his face, revealing a rare flash of anger. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his voice low and almost a growl. Before him was the logo sketch, unfinished but enough to betray her actions. Emma swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. "It's just a small project," she said, trying to keep her tone steady. "I need to work, William. I can't just sit here like a decoration." William stared at her, his eyes darkening like a brewing storm. "I made it clear to you," he said, each word piercing her pride. "That trivial work isn't suitable for you. For me. Who do you think you are, defying me?" Before Emma could respond, he raised the laptop high and smashed it onto the floor. The shattering sound rang out, plastic and glass scattering everywhere, the screen going black like a final end to her last shred of hope. Emma screamed, dropping to her knees on the floor, her shaking hands gathering the broken pieces. "You're insane!" she yelled, tears spilling uncontrollably. "That was everything I had. You had no right." She looked up, her red eyes glaring at him with a hatred she'd never felt so keenly before. William stood there, still clutching a fragment of the laptop, his breathing heavy, but his gaze unshaken, cold, arrogant, and utterly in control. "You belong to me," he said, his voice deep like a verdict. "You signed the contract, Emma. Don't make me remind you again." That was the last straw. Emma stood, tears streaming down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. She let them fall, a testament to her endurance reaching its limit. She stepped closer to him, so near she could feel his breath, and shouted, "I'm not a tool for you to use against your past." Her voice broke, carrying all her pent-up frustration, pain, and the awakening sparked by Sophia's secret. "You think you can lock me up here? Turn me into something to flaunt? To forget her and your damn past? I'm not Sophia, and I'll never let you make me into her." William froze, and for the first time she saw a flicker in his eyes. Not fear, but a pain being touched. But he quickly regained his icy composure, turning and walking out of the room without another word. The door shut behind him, leaving Emma amid the wreckage of her laptop and her shredded dignity. She sank to her knees again, hands covering her face, her breathing ragged. But then, amid the pain and helplessness, a new fire ignited within her, not to keep enduring, but to break free. She wiped her tears, stood up, her eyes blazing with fierce resolve. "I'm getting out of here," she whispered to herself. "No matter the cost, I won't let him control me for another day." From that day, Emma began planning in secret. She stopped resisting openly. She learned to stay silent, offering forced smiles when William gave orders, playing the perfect Mrs. Carter in public. But inside, she was a warrior gearing up for her final battle. She knew she needed money to pay off William and reclaim her freedom, but without her laptop, she had to find another way. She started observing the mansion more closely, memorizing the guards' routines, William's schedule, and the blind spots the cameras couldn't see. One morning, as a maid brought tea to her room, Emma secretly borrowed her phone for a few minutes, sending an anonymous email to an international design firm she'd heard of from an old client. She attached her old portfolio, files she'd stored in the cloud before William took her laptop. "This is my last chance," she wrote in the email, her hands trembling as she hit send. She erased all traces immediately, returning the phone without raising suspicion. Day after day, Emma lived like a shadow in the mansion. But each night, she lay in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, envisioning the day she'd leave. She didn't know if the company would reply, but she had no other options. William might have smashed her laptop, but he couldn't smash her will. She would escape him, this gilded cage, and the ghost of Sophia he'd unwittingly dragged her into. A week later, while William was out, the maid handed her a phone. Not hers, but a secret one Mia had sent through the gardener. Emma opened the message, her heart racing as she read Mia's words. "That international company replied. They want to meet you." Emma smiled, the first genuine smile in weeks. She texted back, "Get ready. I'll be out of here soon." She hid the phone in a secret spot under the bed, her heart brimming with determination. The last straw had fallen, and now Emma didn't just want to leave. She wanted to prove he couldn't hold her forever. Chapter 8. The Day of Departure. William's loss. The morning sunlight slipped through the white silk curtains in the mansion, but the atmosphere today felt heavier than usual. Emma stood in the lavish bedroom she had called home for nearly a year, her large brown eyes quietly scanning the cold space. On the bed lay the old backpack she had brought with her on the first day. Now it held a few simple outfits she had secretly bought with her savings, a new phone sent by Mia, and a copy of the major design contract she had just signed with an international company. She wore a gray hoodie, ripped jeans, and old sneakers, items she had kept hidden from William and the household staff's prying eyes. The big contract from the international company was her light at the end of the tunnel. After months of working in secret through anonymous emails, sending designs via a borrowed phone, and meeting clients through Mia, Emma had secured a deal worth nearly $50,000, enough to pay off William and start over. But the money hadn't reached her yet. The company informed her it would be transferred within a month after she completed the final design. That didn't stop her from leaving. She couldn't endure another day in this gilded cage. She would pay him later once the funds hit her account, but for now she needed freedom. Emma walked to the small table by the window, took a sheet from William's notepad, and wrote a few lines with a ballpoint pen. "Thank you for everything, but I don't belong here. I'll pay you back the $50,000 within a month when I receive the money from my new contract. Don't look for me." She placed the note on the pillow where she had slept each night, her eyes flickering with a moment of hesitation. Promising to repay him within a month was her final commitment, not to please him, but to sever all ties cleanly. She took a deep breath, slung the backpack over her shoulder, and quietly left the room. She had planned it meticulously. William was at an important meeting downtown, lasting until noon. The guards were stationed at the main gate, but she knew an escape route through the back garden, the side gate the gardener left unlocked every Tuesday morning. She moved through the hallway, avoiding the maid's gazes, then slipped out through that exit. As she stepped onto the narrow path outside the mansion, she didn't look back. A taxi arranged by Mia waited at the street corner. Emma climbed in, her heart pounding with the freedom she had just seized, though she knew she still had a burden to settle within the next month. William entered the mansion late that afternoon, his polished leather shoes tapping rhythmically on the marble floor. He wore a black suit, briefcase in hand, his face cold after a long day of work. He didn't call out for Emma. He rarely did. But he expected her to be somewhere in the house, perhaps sitting silently in the living room with a book or standing by the window with that defiant look he'd grown accustomed to. Her presence had become a part of his life without him realizing it until today. He climbed the stairs to the bedroom and immediately sensed an odd void. The room was too silent. No tapping of keys, no soft sighs he often heard from her. The bed was neatly made, but it lacked the warmth of life. He frowned, his gaze settling on the small note on the pillow. He picked it up, reading Emma's handwritten words. "Thank you for everything, but I don't belong here. I'll pay you back the $50,000 within a month when I receive the money from my new contract. Don't look for me." William's lip curled into a smirk, his voice dripping with arrogance as he muttered, "She'll come back." He tossed the note onto the table, unperturbed, and left the room. In his mind, the idea that Emma could earn $50,000 in a month was absurd. A new contract? With a freelancer like her, he didn't believe she had it in her. He was certain she'd soon fail, returning with downcast eyes and pleas for forgiveness. "A month?" he mused, smirking again. "She doesn't know what she's talking about." He sat in his study, poured a glass of whiskey, and sipped it as he did every evening, confident that control remained firmly in his grasp. But days passed, and Emma didn't return. The mansion grew emptier. William walked through the living room where she used to sit, but the armchair was now vacant. He entered her bedroom, finding the closet bare except for a single scribbled sketch. The emptiness weighed on him, stirring memories of the pain when Sophia had left him. Doubt began to creep in. Could she actually do what she promised? He had no proof beyond the words in her note, but his arrogance started to waver under the prolonged silence. Chapter 9. The Awakening. Sophia returns. William sat in his study, the dim light from the desk lamp illuminating his face, highlighting the sharp features now tinged with a rare weariness. The whiskey glass in his hand had long gone dry, But he didn't refill it. He just gripped it tightly, as if trying to hold on to something slipping away. Emma's letter still lay on the desk, her neat but resolute handwriting, a declaration he couldn't erase. "I'll pay you back the $50,000 within a month, when I receive the money from my new contract. Don't look for me." He had smirked when he first read it, certain that a freelancer like her couldn't earn such a large sum so quickly. He thought she'd soon return, head bowed in apology, begging for his forgiveness. But a week had passed, then two, and Emma still hadn't appeared. The vast mansion had never been so silent. William walked through the hallway, the sound of his leather shoes on the marble floor echoing like a solitary note. He paused at the living room, where Emma used to sit with her design book, her long brown hair cascading over her shoulders, her large eyes flashing with a defiance he'd once found annoying. Now the armchair stood empty, devoid of the rustle of turning pages or her soft sighs. He began to realize he missed her, not just because she filled the void Sophia had left, but for something deeper he'd never acknowledged. He stepped into her bedroom, opening the now empty closet, his hand brushing against a scribbled sketch she'd left in the corner. He looked at the bold lines on it, designs he'd once mocked, once smashed her laptop to stop her from pursuing. And for the first time, he wondered what he missed about her. It wasn't obedience. She'd never been obedient. It wasn't beauty, though she was beautiful in a natural, unpretentious way, with those bright, large eyes and fair skin he'd tried to mold into a perfect image. He missed her resilience, the way she argued with him, despite knowing she couldn't win, the way she stood tall, even when he'd caged her in this golden prison. Emma was different from Sophia. Sophia left him because she didn't need him, because her family and career mattered more. Emma left because she chose freedom, because she refused to belong to him. And that very difference kept her on his mind. William sat on the bed, clutching the sketch, his gaze distant. He remembered the times she'd yelled at him, calling him controlling, and even the clumsy way she'd made coffee in the kitchen one rare morning he'd let her roam free in the house. Those moments, though small, had etched themselves deeply into his memory. He'd once thought she was just a pawn to spite Sophia, to prove he could have a perfect marriage. But now with her gone, he realized he hadn't just lost a pawn. He'd lost someone he'd never truly valued. The doorbell rang, interrupting William's thoughts. He frowned, not expecting anyone at this hour. Nearly 9 p.m., with the sky pitch black and a cold wind rustling through the garden outside. As the maid opened the door, Sophia's sweet but cutting voice rang out, "Where's William?" "I need to see him now." Before he could react, Sophia strode into the study, her red high heels clacking on the marble floor. She wore a tight black dress that flattered her tall, slender figure, her golden hair falling loosely like silk, her sharp blue eyes scanning him with a fake smile. "William," Sophia said, her voice sweet but dripping with sarcasm. She sat in the chair across from him without invitation, crossing her legs, picking up his empty whiskey glass and shaking it as if it still held liquor. "I heard your little wife ran off. Such a pity." She tilted her head, her eyes glinting with delight. "She abandoned you, just like I did. You can't keep anyone, can you, William?" William clenched his fists, anger flaring within him like a fire pent up too long. Sophia always knew how to prod his old wounds, and this time she stabbed deeper. He stood, stepping close to her, towering over her by a full head, his gray eyes blazing with rare fury. "She's not like you," he said, his voice low but sharp as a blade. "Emma didn't abandon me because she didn't need me. She left because she wanted to, something you never had the guts to do." He leaned in, his gaze locking onto hers. "You left me because you're a coward, Sophia. You chose your family and career over facing me." Sophia stiffened, her smile vanishing for a moment, replaced by an angry sneer. "Coward?" she repeated, her voice rising in indignation. She shot to her feet, facing him, her blue eyes blazing. "I left you because I couldn't live with someone like you. Cold, controlling, and never truly loving me. She saw it too, William. That's why she left, and you're alone again. Just like when I walked away." Her words cut into him like a knife, but instead of breaking him, they ignited a fierce resolve. He turned away, unwilling to let her see the flicker in his eyes, his hands gripping the chair's edge until his knuckles whitened. "Get out," he said, his voice cold but trembling with rage. Sophia smirked, her tone thick with disdain. "Good luck finding her." "But she won't come back." She turned on her heel and left, the sound of her heels fading, leaving the room in heavy silence. But Sophia's words lingered in his mind, like a flame burning through his last shred of arrogance. William stood there, breathing heavily, and for the first time, he realized he didn't want to lose Emma. Not for his reputation, not to spite Sophia, but for her. He picked up the phone and called his assistant, his voice firm. "Find her. At any cost. I want to know where she is, what she's doing, right now." Within 3 days, he got word. Emma was working as a barista at a small cafe in the suburbs, living a simple life he couldn't imagine for someone who'd once been his wife. William started going to the cafe every day. He sat in the darkest corner, wearing a dark coat to avoid notice, ordering coffee he didn't drink, just to watch her from afar. Emma wore a plain t-shirt, her hair tied up high, her hands deftly preparing drinks with a natural smile he'd never seen when she was with him. She chatted with customers, laughed with coworkers, showing no trace of the suffocation he'd once imposed on her. He didn't dare approach, not out of fear of rejection, but because he didn't yet know what to say to fix his mistakes. But each day his longing grew, and he knew he couldn't let her vanish forever. He needed her, not as a pawn, but as someone he genuinely wanted to keep in his life. Chapter 10. Climax. Tearing the contract. A light rain pattered outside, tiny droplets tapping against the glass windows of William's office at Carter Enterprises. Emma stood in front of the towering building, her old sneakers stained with mud from the suburban road she'd just traveled. She wore a gray hoodie, ripped jeans, and carried her worn backpack. No trace remained of the Mrs. Carter William had once tried to mold her into. Her hand gripped a thick envelope containing a $50,000 check she'd just received from the international company after completing her major design project. Today was the final day of the 1-month period she'd promised to repay him, and she was here to end it all, not to negotiate, not to reconcile, but to sever the last thread binding them. Emma took a deep breath and stepped through the building's revolving glass door, feeling out of place among the men in expensive suits and women with designer handbags. She didn't belong here. She never had. The reception desk was the same as her first visit, staffed by a blonde employee with a professional smile. "I'm here to see William Carter," Emma said, her voice firm but trembling slightly with tension. The receptionist smiled and greeted her as Mrs. Carter, then made a call, saying with a smile, "Please go up, Mrs. Carter. Mr. Carter is in his office." The elevator carried her upward, each ding like a hammer striking her heart. When the doors opened, she stepped into the wide hallway, its gleaming marble floor and walls adorned with costly abstract paintings. A secretary led her to William's office, and as the door swung open, she saw him sitting behind a large desk, his gray eyes lifting from a stack of papers. He wore a black suit, hands clasped together, his face showing a hint of fatigue but retaining its familiar, sharp coldness. When he saw her, his eyes flickered with surprise, quickly replaced by a glimmer of hope she didn't want to acknowledge. "What are you doing here?" William asked, his voice deep but laced with curiosity. He stood, stepping out from behind the desk, his leather shoes tapping lightly on the floor as he approached her. Emma placed the envelope on the desk, pushing it toward him with a decisive motion. "Your money," she said, her voice steady and unwavering. $50,000 as I promised in the letter. I don't owe you anything anymore. From now on, we're done." She turned to leave, her steps quick as if eager to escape the room as soon as possible. But William was faster than she expected. He moved forward, blocking the door, his gaze locking onto hers, refusing to let her go so easily. "Wait," he said, his voice hoarse, carrying a tone she'd never heard from him before. Not a command, not arrogance, but a small plea. Before Emma could react, he returned to the desk, pulled the marriage contract from a drawer, the original they'd signed nearly a year ago, and tore it into pieces right in front of her. The fragments fell to the floor like white rain, silent yet dramatic, and Emma stood stunned, her large eyes widening in shock. "I don't need the money," William said, his voice low but brimming with emotion. the first time she'd heard him speak without his usual cold control. He stepped closer, his hand trembling slightly as it reached out as if to touch her, but he stopped when she instinctively stepped back. "I need you, Emma." He looked straight into her eyes, his gray gaze no longer a storm, but a deep lake, full of vulnerability and sincerity. "I used to think you were a way to forget Sophia," he confessed, his voice rough, as if dredging up his own pain. "I was wrong. I don't love you because you fill her void. I love you, for your strength, for never bending to me, for making me feel alive." Emma stood there, her eyes wide with shock, her breath rapid as if caught in her throat. She'd never heard William say such things, not with arrogance, not with calculation, but with a raw honesty that made her tremble. She swallowed hard, searching for a response, but her mind swirled with conflicting emotions. He'd just said he loved her? This man who'd confined her, smashed her laptop, turned her into a puppet in his revenge game. She couldn't believe it. No, she didn't dare believe it. "You," Emma began, her voice shaky, her hand tightening on her backpack strap as if to steady herself. "You can't erase what you've done with a few words. Do you think I'll forget the months you controlled me? Turned me into something for you to show off?" She shook her head, her eyes flaring with a mix of anger and pain. "I don't want anything more to do with you, William. I came here to pay you back, to end this, not to hear this." William stepped back, his hands falling to his sides, a flash of pain crossing his eyes, though the sincerity remained. "I know," he said, his voice hoarse, almost a whisper. "I don't expect you to forgive me now. I don't deserve it. I know I was wrong. About you, about everything. I treated you like something to control, but now I see I don't want you to stay because of a contract or money or anything but you. I just want you to know the truth, that I love you, and I'm willing to do anything to prove it." Emma looked at him, her heart pounding with clashing emotions. His words rang in her mind like a melody she couldn't shake. Honest, wounded, and powerful. She saw a different William, not the arrogant CEO who'd forced her into a contract, not the cold man who'd shattered her dreams, but a man standing before her, bared with pain and hope. Yet she couldn't erase the scars he'd left on her heart. The suffocation, the helplessness, the nights she'd cried alone in that lavish room. "I don't trust you," she said, her voice low but firm, though tears welled in her eyes. "Not because I don't see your sincerity, but because I can't risk it again. I fought too hard to escape you, to find myself again. I don't want to go back. Not now, maybe not ever." She turned, stepping toward the door, her hand gripping the knob as if to anchor her resolve. "Emma!" William called, his voice breaking with a rare desperation. She paused but didn't turn around. "I won't force you to stay," he said, each word dragged from deep within him. "But if one day you change your mind, I'll wait. Not because I want to control you, but because I can't imagine my life without you." Emma didn't reply. She opened the door and stepped out, the sound of the rain outside drowning out her footsteps. She didn't look back, but tears finally fell, streaming down her cheeks as she walked through the hallway. She was stunned by his confession, but her heart remained shut. Not because she didn't feel his sincerity, but because she didn't want to entangle herself with him again. She'd reclaimed her freedom, and she wouldn't trade it, not even for a moment of weakness. William stood there watching the door close behind her, his hand clutching the last fragment of the contract left on the floor. He didn't chase her. For the first time, he respected her choice. But within him, a flame still burned, not to control, but to hope. Chapter 11. The Pursuit. William didn't give up after the day Emma left his office with the $50,000 check and a cold rejection. He knew he couldn't force her back like before, but he also couldn't let her vanish from his life forever. He began his pursuit, not with power or money, but with a shameless persistence that even surprised himself. By day, Emma worked freelance design from her small apartment, a cramped but cozy space, its desk overflowing with drawing paper and a new laptop she'd bought with money from her big contract. Orders came to her steadily, from restaurant logos to ad posters, like a confirmation that she'd reclaimed herself after months of confinement. But William wouldn't leave her in peace. He showed up at her door on unexpected mornings, holding a bag of drinks, vanilla lattes she'd once liked, iced green tea, or even a strawberry smoothie he guessed she might enjoy. "I brought this for you," he'd say, his tone casual, leaning against the doorframe with a half smile. Emma glared at him through the crack in the door, pencil still in hand. "I don't need it. Take it back." But he didn't leave. He set the bag on the doorstep, knocking a few more times until she reluctantly opened it just to stop the noise. Some days he was bolder, slipping inside when she forgot to lock the door, lingering on the old sofa next to her desk. "What are you doing? Get out!" she snapped, shooing him like a fly. But William just grinned, leaning back on the sofa and saying, "I'm not bothering you, just watching you work." Emma, exasperated, threw an eraser at him, but he dodged it, picked it up, and placed it back on her desk with a nonchalant expression. At night, when Emma worked at the cafe, William continued his strategy. He sat at the bar right in front of her, ordering a slew of drinks: lattes, cappuccinos, Americanos, bubble tea, just to annoy her. "Are you trying to turn me into a coffee machine?" she snapped, her hands moving deftly while he smiled. "If you'd talk to me, I'd order less." She shot him a glare, but he stayed there day after day, ordering so much that the staff nicknamed him the weird customer. He waited for her every late night, standing outside the cafe with his sleek black car parked discreetly around the corner. "I can get home myself," Emma grumbled, brushing past him. But William followed, holding an umbrella when it rained, saying, "I'm not comfortable letting you go alone." He bought her food: sandwiches, hot soup, instant noodles, leaving them at her cafe or doorstep with a note: "Don't starve yourself." Emma didn't thank him, but he noticed she stopped throwing them away like she did the first time. One night, he showed up at her place demanding to eat dinner together, sitting outside her door for 3 hours until she opened it, unable to stand it any longer. Another time, he lied that his car broke down in the rain, sleeping on her sofa, keeping her awake with his coughing fits. Then one night after walking her home, William stood at her door, his eyes glinting in the dark. "Emma," he called, then suddenly leaned down and kissed her. Emma flinched, pushing him away. "What are you doing?" But he held her tight, whispering, "I can't lose you again." She stopped resisting, her lips slowly returning the kiss, hesitant, tentative, but full of emotion. When they parted, Emma looked at him, bewildered, while he brushed her hair gently. "I won't give up." Chapter 12. A perfect ending. A true proposal. The rain had stopped, giving way to a peaceful evening in the suburbs, where the faint glow of streetlights illuminated the narrow road leading to Emma's apartment. William stood in front of the mirror in the living room of his mansion, adjusting a simple white shirt. No suit, no tie, no trace of the arrogant CEO who had forced Emma into a marriage contract nearly a year ago. He looked at himself in the mirror, his gray eyes no longer cold, but alight with a gentle determination. He had changed, not overnight, but through the months of persistently pursuing her, through the times she'd brushed him off, through the moments he realized he couldn't bear to lose her again. Tonight he would do something he'd never done before: propose to her, not for anyone else, but for the love he felt for her. William left the mansion with a small bag, containing items he'd prepared himself: a simple bottle of red wine, 2 homemade sandwiches, clumsy but heartfelt, and a small ring box he'd spent a week choosing. He hadn't hired a chef, booked a fancy restaurant, or called the press. Everything was simple, because he knew Emma didn't need extravagance. She only needed sincerity. He drove to her apartment, his heart pounding in his chest, not from fear of rejection, but because, for the first time, he was placing his entire heart into something he couldn't control. Emma sat in her small living room, the light from a desk lamp shining on the workspace where she'd just finished a design for a new client. She wore a white t-shirt and shorts, her long brown hair tied up high, her large eyes focused on the laptop screen. Her life now was one of freedom, designing by day, brewing coffee at the cafe by night, with no one controlling her anymore. But William lingered in her mind, despite her reluctance to admit it. His shameless appearances with drinks, his loitering beside her as she worked, his late-night walks home with her, even sleeping on her sofa with the excuse of a broken car, All of it left her flustered. That kiss from the other night haunted her, his warmth something she both feared and couldn't forget. She told herself she didn't want to get entangled, but her heart had wavered, if only slightly. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. She frowned, glancing at the clock. Nearly 8 p.m. Not a time for Mia or anyone else to drop by. She stood, opened the door, and saw William standing there, bag in hand, his familiar half-smile on his lips. "You again?" she asked, her tone half irritated, half curious. "What's it this time? Demanding dinner or sleeping over again?" William chuckled softly, shaking his head. "No," he said, his voice deep but gentle. "I'm here to invite you to dinner. Just the two of us. No tricks." Emma tilted her head, eyes wary, but something in his tone kept her from refusing outright. "Fine," she said, crossing her arms. "But don't expect me to cook." He led her to the small balcony of her apartment, a spot she rarely used due to her busy schedule. William had brought a folding table, setting it up with the wine, 2 foil-wrapped sandwiches, and 2 plain glass tumblers. No flowers, no candles, no music, just the distant street lights and a soft breeze passing through. Emma sat across from him, her eyes flickering with surprise. "This is the dinner you meant?" she asked, her voice tinged with mockery. "I thought you'd drag me to some 5-star restaurant." "I know you don't like those things," William replied, pouring wine into her glass. "You like simplicity, and I want you to see I'm sincere." Emma took a sip, her gaze on him, saying nothing but feeling a strange warmth inside. He had changed, she could sense it. The meal passed in comfortable silence, broken only by a small laugh when Emma teased him about the burnt edge of his sandwich. When she finished, William took a deep breath, stood, and before she could grasp what was happening, he dropped to one knee in front of her. Emma froze, the wine glass in her hand halting midair. He pulled a small ring box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a simple silver ring, no gems, no flashiness, but with a refined beauty she adored. "Emma," William said, his voice hoarse with emotion, his gray eyes locking onto hers. "This time, it's not for anyone else, not for a contract, not for status, just because I love you. I was wrong to control you, to think you were something for me to show off. But now I know I can't live without you. Not because you fill a void, but because you're the one I want to be with until the end. Will you marry me?" Emma stared at him, her large eyes wide with shock, then suddenly burst into laughter, not mocking, but a light, surprised laugh. She set the glass down, hand covering her mouth, her eyes shimmering under the light. "You really are shameless," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "But this time, I'll say yes." She paused, looking straight at him, her expression turning serious. "On one condition, you have to respect me. No more controlling me. I want us to start over, for real." William smiled, the first time she'd seen his smile free of any arrogance. Just pure, genuine happiness. He slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands shaking slightly with emotion, then stood and pulled her into his arms. Emma didn't push him away. She wrapped her arms around him, his warmth seeping into her, dispelling the shadows of the past. "I promise," he whispered into her hair. "This time, it's just you and me." At that same moment, from a distant street corner, Sophia stood under a tree's shadow, her sharp blue eyes fixed on Emma's small balcony. She wore a long coat, her hand clutching her purse tightly, a bitter glint crossing her face as she watched William kneel in proposal. She'd heard he was chasing Emma, but hadn't believed he'd go this far. Now, seeing him embrace her, the joyful smile on his lips, one she'd never seen when they were together, Sophia realized she'd lost him forever. She turned away, walking silently into the night, her figure fading into the darkness, leaving William to a future without her. William and Emma stood on the balcony, hand in hand, their gazes forward. They didn't need a lavish mansion or the glow of high society. They only needed each other. They were starting anew, overcoming Sophia's shadow, building a future grounded in true love and the respect they'd fought to earn. Emma rested her head on his shoulder, smiling. "This time, let's do it right, okay?" William nodded, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. Right and forever. Thank you for following this heartfelt story of Soul Stories channel. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. If you believe that true love can withstand all trials and sometimes begins in the simplest of ways, don't forget to hit the like button and share this story with your friends. To never miss out on touching and meaningful stories, subscribe to our channel and help us spread messages of love and warmth to everyone. Let's cherish the beautiful moments of life and love together.